The sound of paper tearing is distinct. It is a dry, violent sound, especially in a room designed to absorb noise. The lobby of the First Meridian branch in downtown Seattle was built for silence. Plush carpets, acoustic ceiling tiles, thick glass partitions that separate the money from the people who want it. But the tear was loud. It sounded like a bone snapping. I watched my own hands do it. My fingers were manicured, pale pink polish, chip-free, steady. They held the cashier's check, the heavy bond paper that smelled faintly of toner and authority. And they ripped it down the middle, right through the routing number, right through the signature line, right through the sum. $10 million. The two halves of the paper fluttered down onto my mahogany desk. They landed softly, one overlapping the other, obscuring the zeros. I didn't look up immediately. I looked at the jagged edge where the paper had separated. I felt a rush of adrenaline. It was the cold, sharp thrill of doing my job, of protecting the institution, of stopping a fraud before it could infect the ledger. I aligned my pen next to my keyboard, perfectly parallel. That is the detail I remember most. Before I looked at the man sitting across from me, I made sure my pen was straight. It felt necessary. It felt like order. Ms. Vance. The voice was deep. It wasn't angry. It wasn't shocked. It was just tired. I finally looked up. Elias Thorne sat in the guest chair. The chair was too small for him. He was a large man, broad-shouldered, but he held himself inward as if trying to occupy less space. He wore a canvas jacket that had seen rain for a decade. The collar was frayed. His hands, resting on his knees, were mapped with scars. Thick, ropey scars that didn't come from paper cuts. He was black. He was older, maybe 60, maybe 70. Time moves differently on faces that have weathered hard winters. He looked at the torn pieces of paper on my desk. Then he looked at me. His eyes were yellowed at the corners, but the irises were dark and steady. He didn't blink. "You didn't have to do that," he said. His voice was so quiet I had to lean forward to hear it over the hum of the air conditioning. "Mr. Thorne," I said. My voice was professional. It was the voice I had practiced in front of the mirror for 3 years. The voice that got me promoted from teller to floor manager in 18 months. The voice that was supposed to get me to regional. "This bank," I continued, gesturing vaguely to the marble floors around us, "has a zero-tolerance policy for fraudulent instruments." I used the words like a shield. Fraudulent instruments. It sounded clean, it sounded objective. "It's a cashier's check," Elias said. "It is a high-quality forgery," I corrected. I picked up the left half of the check. I held it up, letting the light catch the watermark, or where the watermark should have been. "The paper weight is wrong," I said. "The font on the routing number is off by a fraction of a millimeter." "And the amount?" I let the paper drop back onto the desk. "Mr. Thorne, accounts with this specific profile do not receive wire transfers of this magnitude. It triggers a level 4 compliance flag immediately." I didn't tell him that the profile was simply his zip code and his credit score. I didn't tell him that the flag was a gut feeling I had the moment he walked through the revolving doors. He didn't look like $10 million. He looked like an overdraft fee. He looked like a liability. And in banking, perception is the first line of defense. "It's a settlement," Elias said. He reached into his jacket pocket. My hand moved instantly to the silent alarm button under my desk. I didn't press it, but my finger hovered over the plastic trigger. I was trained to react to sudden movements. We all were. The active shooter drills, the robbery protocols, the constant reminder that desperate people do desperate things. But Elias didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a folded letter. He placed it gently on the desk next to the ruined check. "Read it," he said. "I didn't touch it." "I don't need to read the backstory, Mr. Thorne. The instrument is void. I have confiscated it as per federal banking regulations regarding attempted fraud." I was lying. Technically, I was supposed to hold the check and call the issuing bank for verification. I was supposed to run it through the scanner. I was supposed to call the risk management department. But I hadn't done any of that. I had torn it up. Why? Because Julian was watching. I could feel his eyes on the back of my neck. Julian Haynes, the branch president. His office was directly behind me, a glass cube elevated on a riser. Overlooking the floor like a guard tower, Julian liked decisive action. He hated hesitation. Last week, he had fired a teller for taking 20 minutes to verify a signature on a home equity line. "Paralysis is profit loss," Julian always said. He wanted wolves, not sheep. I wanted to be a wolf. So I tore the check. I showed Julian that I wasn't afraid to protect the bank's assets. I showed him I could smell a lie. Elias stared at the letter he had placed on the desk. He pushed it forward with one thick finger. "It's not a backstory," he said. "It's a court order." I sighed. I checked my watch. It was 20:14 p.m. I had a conference call with the district lead in 16 minutes. "Oh, Mr. Thorne, I am going to ask you to leave. I will retain this evidence. If you wish to contest this, you are welcome to contact our legal department. I can write down the 1-800 number for you." I reached for a sticky note. I uncapped my pen. That same pen I had aligned so perfectly. "Please," Elias said. The word hung in the air. It wasn't a beg. It was a warning. "Check the routing number," he said. "Just the first 4 digits. I don't need 2. Check them." He didn't raise his voice. He just intensified the silence around him. There was a gravity to him now that I hadn't noticed before. A weight. It made the air in the cubicle feel thin. I glanced at the torn paper. The first 4 digits of the routing number were visible on the left half, 004. My stomach turned over just once. A slow, cold rotation. Commercial banks don't start with 000. Credit unions don't start with 000. 000 is reserved. It is reserved for the United States Treasury. I looked at the check again. Really looked at it. The forgery I had identified wasn't a lack of quality. It was a lack of branding. There was no bank logo in the corner, just the seal. The Great Seal of the United States, faint gray, embedded in the fibers. And the signature. It wasn't a scribbled autograph from a loan officer. It was a digital stamp. Department of Defense, Defense Finance and Accounting Service. My mouth went dry. It tasted like copper. I looked at the profile on my screen again. Elias Thorne. No current employment. Disability payments for us $400 a month. Address a co-op housing unit in the International District. But I hadn't scrolled down. I hadn't clicked the History tab. I hadn't looked at where the disability payments were coming from. I looked back at Elias. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking past me. He was looking at the glass office behind my head. I heard the door open behind me. The heavy, distinct click of the magnetic lock releasing on the glass door. Julian. I stiffened. I put on my best face. The face of the efficient manager who had just neutralized a threat. I turned in my swivel chair. "Mr. Haynes," I said, smiling. "I was just handling a situation with." Julian wasn't looking at me. He was standing at the edge of my cubicle. He was wearing his 3-piece charcoal suit, the one he wore when the board members were in town. He was holding a cup of coffee, but the cup was tilted. Dark liquid was dripping over the rim, staining his thumb, dripping onto the carpet. He didn't seem to notice. His face was pale. Not the pale of sickness. The pale of sudden, absolute recognition. He was staring at Elias Thorne, and Elias Thorne was staring back. The silence that stretched between them wasn't empty. It was heavy. It was loaded with a history I didn't understand. Julian's eyes flicked down to my desk. He saw the torn check. He saw the seal on the paper. He saw the jagged rip through the $10 million. His hand started to shake, just a little, enough to send another drop of coffee to the floor. "Alara?" Julian whispered. He had never whispered in his life. Julian Haynes was a man who projected. "Alara, what did you do? It was a fake," I said, my voice faltering for the first time. The paper weight was wrong. I followed protocol. Julian looked at me then, and for the first time since I had started working at First Meridian, I saw fear in his eyes. Raw, unadulterated panic. "That's not a check," Julian said. He looked back at Elias. Elias hadn't moved. He hadn't stood up. He just watched Julian with that same terrifying calm. "Hello, Lieutenant," Elias said. Julian flinched. The title hit him like a physical blow. Julian wasn't a lieutenant. He was a regional manager. He was an MBA. He was a golfer. Julian started, then stopped. He swallowed hard. "I didn't know you were in Seattle. Sergeant Major, Sergeant Major." The rank hung in the air between the marble pillars. I looked at Elias, the worn coat, the scars, the stillness. I looked at the torn paper on my desk. I realized then that I hadn't just torn up money. I had torn up a treaty. And the war was about to start. Julian didn't scream. He didn't flip the desk. He didn't fire me on the spot. That would have been human. Human reactions are messy, loud, and inefficient. The bank is none of those things. Julian took a breath. He inhaled slowly through his nose, a controlled, practiced intake of oxygen designed to lower the heart rate. He looked at the puddle of coffee on the carpet. "Janice," he said, speaking into the air. He wasn't talking to a ghost. He was talking to the tiny microphone clipped to his lapel, hidden beneath the silk tie. Maintenance to the floor. "Spill in Sector 4. Priority." He looked at me. His eyes had changed. The terror I had seen a moment ago, the raw animal fear of a subordinate facing a superior officer was gone. It had been filed away. It had been shoved into a mental drawer and locked. In its place was the smooth, impenetrable glaze of the regional manager. "Ems Vance," he said. "Please bring the document and Mr. Thorne into my office." He turned and walked away. He didn't wait to see if we followed. He knew we would. Authority is a current. You either swim with it or you drown. I picked up the two halves of the check. My hands were shaking now. Just a tremor in the fingertips. I pressed the jagged edges together for a second, as if shear will could fuse the fibers back into $10 million. It didn't. I looked at Elias. He was still sitting in the guest chair. He hadn't moved when Julian appeared. He hadn't moved when Julian left. "Mr. Thorne," I said. My voice was thin. Elias stood up. His joints popped. A sound like dry wood breaking. He towered over me. Up close, he smelled of rain and old tobacco and something metallic. Gun oil, maybe. Or just the smell of a man who spends a lot of time waiting for things to go wrong. He walked past me toward the glass cube. I followed him. I felt like a child who had broken a vase. But I also felt something else. Resentment. Why hadn't he dressed better? Why hadn't he warned me? Why did he bring a check that looked like a photocopy from a library printer? I was blaming him for my own compliance. It is a defense mechanism. If the victim is at fault, the executioner can sleep. We entered Julian's office. The door sealed behind us with a pneumatic hiss. The silence was absolute. The hum of the lobby, the click of heels, the murmur of tellers, it all vanished. We were in a vacuum. Julian was already behind his desk. He was typing. He didn't look up. "Sit," he said. Elias sat. I stood. I didn't feel like I had the right to a chair. Julian stopped typing. He turned his monitor slightly, angling it away from us. "Vance," Julian said, "you have initiated a kinetic destruction of a negotiable instrument." Kinetic destruction. He made it sound like a procedure. He made it sound like I had pressed a button on a machine, not ripped a man's future in half with my bare hands. "It was a security protocol," I said. "The routing number was..." "The routing number is a Class A Treasury dispersal code," Julian interrupted. His voice was flat. "It is used for black budget allocations, settlements, non-disclosure payouts. It does not appear in the commercial database because it does not exist in the commercial world." He looked at me then. "You tried to run a stealth bomber through a bicycle lane, Alara?" He opened his desk drawer. He pulled out a roll of Scotch tape. It was the heavy, clear kind, archival quality. He slid it across the polished surface of the desk. It stopped exactly in front of me. "Fix it," he said. I looked at the tape. I looked at the torn check in my hand. "Mr. Haynes, a tape check is legally void. The optical scanners won't fix it," he repeated. "We aren't going to scan it." I sat down. I peeled the end of the tape. The sound was a screech. In the silence of the office, it sounded like a scream. I laid the two halves of the check on Julian's desk. I aligned the jagged tier. I tried to match the fibers. The one in the 10 million was severed. I pushed the pieces together. I applied the tape. I smoothed it down with my fingernail. I was fixing a $10 million mistake with 2 cents of adhesive. It felt absurd. It felt insulting. But it also felt like a solution. "See," I thought. "It's back together. It's whole. We can move on." Julian watched me work. When I was done, he picked up the check. He didn't look at the amount. He looked at the seal. "Elias," Julian said. He used the first name now. A false intimacy. A manager trying to de-escalate a customer. "I apologize for Ms. Vance's diligence. She is new to the higher tier accounts." She didn't recognize the signature. Elias didn't look at Julian. He looked out the glass wall down at the lobby floor. He was watching the security guard near the entrance. "You got out," Elias said. "I transitioned," Julian corrected, "in 2011. After the withdrawal, you transitioned," Elias repeated. He tasted the word. He found it rotten. "I'm here to deposit the settlement, Julian. I'm done. They paid me out. I want the funds in a secure account. And I want the transfer initialized today." Julian placed the taped check on the desk. He clasped his hands. "We can't process this check." "Elias, you said it was a valid code." "It is," Julian said. "But look at it." He gestured to the tape. "It's mutilated. If I send this to the Federal Reserve, they will flag it. Not because of the amount, but because of the damage. They will assume it was voided. They will trigger an inquiry." Julian leaned forward. "And you don't want an inquiry, Elias. Not with where this money came from. An inquiry means audits. It means unsealing the file. It means the settlement is paused indefinitely." I watched Julian work. It was masterful. He was taking the violence I had committed and turning into a regulatory hurdle that he was trying to help Elias jump over. He was shifting the blame from M's. Vance tore your check to the Federal Reserve is picky. He was normalizing the disaster. So what do we do? I asked. I wanted to be helpful. I wanted to be part of the solution. We open a custodial holding account, Julian said. Internal, off ledger. We credit the funds based on my override authority. We hold the physical check in the vault as a promissory note. We wait for the replacement instrument from the issuer. He looked at Elias. It will take 6 weeks to get a replacement, Elias. You know how the department works, but I can give you access to the funds today. A line of credit against the check. 0 interest? It sounded perfect. It was generous. It was the bank bending over backward to fix a mistake. Just sign the indemnity waiver, Julian said. He slid a tablet across the desk. The screen was glowing with fine print. It just says that you acknowledge the check was damaged during processing and you accept the temporary line of credit in lieu of immediate clearing. Damaged during processing. Not torn by a manager. Processing. The word washed away my sin. I felt a wave of relief so strong it made me dizzy. Julian was saving me. He was fixing it. Elias looked at the tablet. He looked at the tape check. He looked at me. You think this is paper? Iwis said. It is paper? No, he said. It's a countdown. He pointed to the date on the check. Today's date. This isn't a standard payout. It's a 24-hour liquidity authorization. If this money isn't cleared and confirmed by the originating server in D.C. by 5:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the authorization expires. He looked at the clock on the wall. 20:28 p.m. Pacific, 5:08 p.m. Eastern. My heart stopped. It expired 28 minutes ago, I asked. No, Julian said. His face had gone gray again. The Treasury servers have a grace window. Until the end of the business day local time. We have until 5:00 p.m. here. But you said we can't scan it, I said. We can't, Julian said. If we scan a tape check, the system rejects. If we don't scan it, the authorization expires. If it expires, he looked at Elias. If it expires, the deal is off, Elias said. And they come for me. Ooh, I asked. Nobody answered. Julian stood up. He walked to the window. He looked down at the street. We can't request a replacement, Julian said softly. There are no replacements for this kind of fund. It's a one-time burn. He turned back to us. The mask was slipping again. The panic was leaking through the cracks. We have 2.5 hours, Julian said, to make a computer believe that this piece of trash, he pointed to the tape check, is pristine. He looked at me. Alara, log into the terminal. Access the developer backend. Mr. Haynes, I don't have clearance for. Log in, he snapped. I moved to his computer. I typed in my credentials. My hands were sweating. We are going to manually override the optical character recognition, Julian said. We are going to force the system to accept the image. That's illegal, I said. The words came out automatic. That's banking, Julian said. He looked at Elias. If we do this, if we force it through all, the system will accept the deposit, but it will leave a digital scar. A forced entry log. I don't care about the log, Elias said. I care about the liquidity. The log will trigger a manual review, Julian said. Tomorrow morning. Someone at the clearinghouse will look at the transaction. And? Elias asked. And they will see that the timestamp doesn't match the scan data. They will see the override. Julian paused. They will need a scapegoat. Elias, he looked at me. I froze. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. We need to flag the account as high-risk internal review, Julian said. It creates a 24-hour delay on the audit. It buys us a day, but who does the flag attach to? I asked. Julian didn't answer me. He looked at Elias. It attaches to the teller ID that processes the transaction, Julian said. My I do it, Elias said. He wasn't asking. Lara, Julian said. His voice was gentle again. It's a formality. I'll clear it up in the morning. I just need you to key it in. We have to save the deposit. For the bank's sake. For the bank's sake? I looked at the tape check. I looked at the veteran who was afraid of a timeline I didn't understand. I looked at my boss, who was offering me a way to be useful. To be obedient, I typed the command. I entered the override code. I pressed enter. The screen flashed green. Processing, the normalization was complete. We hadn't fixed the problem. We had just buried it deep enough that it would take a day to rot. The screen went black. Not the power down black. The sleep mode black. The terminal had accepted the command, processed the override, and then simply gone to sleep. It was anticlimactic. I expected sirens. I expected a red banner across the monitor screaming UNALRIZED ACCs, but the machine just blinked. A small green LED in the corner of the monitor pulsed on. Off. On. Off. Go back to your desk, Julian said. He was standing by the window again, his back to me. He was watching the traffic on 4th Avenue. He didn't sound like a conspirator anymore. He sounded like a manager who was done with a meeting. "What about Mr. Thorne?" I asked. "Mr. Thorne will wait in the conference room. We need to wait for the batch process to cycle. 500 p.m. I looked at Elias. He was still sitting in the chair, hands resting on his knees. He looked like a statue carved from something harder than the office drywall. He didn't look at me. He was looking at the air vent in the ceiling, listening to the hum of the building. I left the glass cube. Walking back to my desk felt different. The carpet felt spongier. The air felt recycled. I sat down in my ergonomic chair. I reached for my water bottle. My hand knocked into the stapler. It fell off the desk. Clack. Heads turned. 3 tellers looked at me. 1 loan officer looked up from his phone. They looked away just as fast. In a bank, you learn not to stare at the person who just came out of the boss's office. You don't want to catch whatever disease they might have. Usually the disease is lie-off. Today, the disease was felony. I logged back into my own terminal. My fingerprint unlocked the screen. Everything looked normal. My email was open. 3 new messages, 1 from HER about the upcoming potluck, 1 from a client asking about current CD rates, 1 from the IT department about a scheduled server maintenance. Routine, it was terrifyingly routine. I had just forced a $10 million lie into the federal ledger, and the system wanted me to bring a potato salad to the break room on Friday. I deleted the email about the potluck. I looked at the clock, 3:12 p.m., 1 hour and 48 minutes until the deadline. A woman approached my desk. She was elderly, clutching a red purse with both hands. Mrs. Kowalski. I knew her. She came in every Tuesday to withdraw $40 for groceries. Vance. She smiled. It was a sweet, fragile smile. I think the machine ate my card. I looked at her. I tried to focus on her face, but all I could see was the tear in the check, the jagged line through the zeros. "I can help you with that, Mrs. Kowalski," I said. My voice sounded robotic. I typed in her name. I pulled up her profile. Balance of $41.50. I printed a temporary card. I handed it to her. "Thank you, dear," she said. "You're always so efficient. You deserve a raise." She patted my hand. Her skin was dry and cool. "Thank you," I said. She walked away. She was the reality. Small numbers. Rules that worked. If she tried to withdraw 413, the system would stop her. The red lights would flash. The reject slip would print. But Elias Thorne could deposit $10 million of imaginary money because we typed a code. It made me nauseous. I looked at my screen again. I still had the developer console minimized in the background. I shouldn't have opened it. I should have closed it the second I left Julian's office, but I didn't. I clicked the tab. The command line was still there. Override auth 77 Zeul. The cursor blinked. I knew I shouldn't type anything, but the silence in my head was too loud. I needed to know. I typed query history 0 codes is 77 Zeul. I pressed enter. I held my breath. The screen scrolled. Text cascaded down in a waterfall of green data. It wasn't a unique code. It wasn't a one-time emergency latch key. It was a pattern. NTRI. T. Rhinolus D. Antwi T. 1000 23 6 2 AM USRS pay T. R. T. R. N. 212 21 20 12 100 212 FTHER. There were dozens, going back 5 years, different dates, but always the same override code, 77 ZLU, and always a different user ID. I recognized the names. Tony Reynolds, Sarah Patel, David Chang, Alice Fletcher. They were former employees, floor managers like me. I remembered Tony. He was a good manager. Fast, exact. He was fired last year. Gross negligence, the memo said. Something about a compliance failure on a commercial loan. I remembered Sarah. She left 2 years ago. Personal reasons, we were told. But she was escorted out by security. I looked at the list. Every single name associated with the code was gone. Terminated. Blacklisted. I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just a code to bypass the scanner. It was a tag. It was a digital marker that flagged the transaction for a specific kind of internal audit. An audit that required a fall guy. Julian hadn't asked me to help him. He had asked me to kill myself. Professionally. Legally. He knew the system would flag it tomorrow. He knew the high risk label wouldn't stop the investigation. It would just direct the blame. The system would ask, who keyed this in? And the system would answer Alara Vance. And Julian would say, I had no idea she would do such a thing. She must have been coerced. I looked toward the glass office. Julian was sitting at his desk now. He was on the phone. He was laughing. He leaned back in his leather chair, a relaxed, confident man. He wasn't worried about the audit, because he had already processed the solution. Me. I looked back at the screen. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run into his office and smash the monitor. But I didn't. I sat there, frozen, because below the list of names, there was another line of data, a destination log, Targi Asicciones, and I looked at where the money went after it was cleared. It didn't go to customer accounts. It didn't go to savings or checking. The funds from 77 Zool overrides were funneled into a single routing path, Meridian Holdings Sub-Ledger 4. I knew what Sub-Ledger 4 was. It was the bank's proprietary investment arm, the high-frequency trading desk, the casino. They weren't just clearing settlements for veterans. They were using the float, the 24-hour window where the money exists in two places at once, before the Treasury confirms the withdrawal and after the bank confirms the deposit. They were using these massive, off-book injections to leverage overnight trades. They were gambling with ghost money, and Elias Thorne was just the fuel. Ms. Vance, I jumped. A young man was standing at my desk. Marcus, he was a trainee, fresh out of college, eager. Wearing a suit that was slightly too blue. Ms. Vance, sorry to interrupt. He held up a file folder. Mr. Haynes sent me over. He said you need to sign the end-of-day compliance batch. I stared at him. The batch isn't due until 500, I said. I know, Marcus said. But Mr. Haynes said you're leaving early today? I went cold. Am I? That's what he said. He said you weren't feeling well. He said to get your signature now so you can beat the traffic. Marcus smiled. He thought he was being helpful. He thought he was delivering good news. Julian was accelerating the timeline. He wanted me out of the building before the money cleared. If I wasn't in the building when the confirmation came through, I couldn't retract it. I couldn't void the transaction. Give me the pen, I said. Marcus handed me a pen. It was a cheap plastic one. Not my metal pen. I looked at the paper. It was the standard daily sign-off. I certify that all transactions processed under my ID today are valid and compliant with federal regulations. If I signed it, I was sealing the tomb. If I didn't sign it, Marcus would go back to Julian, and Julian would come out here, and he would make a scene. He would escalate, and I would still lose. I looked at Marcus. Do you like working here, Marcus? Yes, ma'am. It's a great opportunity. Learn the codes, I said softly. What? Learn the codes, but don't use them. I signed the paper. I didn't use my normal signature. I pressed hard. The ink blotted through to the next page. I handed the file back. Tell Mr. Haynes I'm staying, I said. But he said, I'm staying until 500, Marcus. I have a client waiting. Marcus looked confused. He looked at the empty chair across from me. Where? He asked. In the conference room, I said. I stood up. I need to go check on him. I walked away from my desk. I walked away from the terminal that held my death sentence. I walked toward the conference room where Elias Thorne was waiting. I wasn't going to check on him. I was going to tell him the truth. I was going to tell him that his $10 million wasn't a settlement. It was a wager. And we were both the chips. The door to conference room B was heavy. Walnut veneer over a steel core. It had a lock that engaged automatically from the outside, but opened freely from the inside. A design choice meant to make clients feel secure while keeping them contained. I pushed it open. The air inside was stagnant. It smelled of dry erase markers and lemon polish. Elias Thorne sat at the head of the long oval table. He hadn't turned on the lights. The only illumination came from the glass wall that faced the corridor, borrowing the fluorescent hum of the hallway. He was sitting in the dark. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't reading a magazine. He was just waiting. Ms. Vance, he said. He didn't turn his head. You should be at your desk. I closed the door behind me. I didn't sit down. I stood by the light switch, my hand hovering over the dimmer. I didn't turn it on. The shadows felt safer. I know what 770U is, I said. My voice was steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Elias turned slowly. The light from the hallway cut across his face, illuminating the scars on his cheek, leaving his eyes in darkness. Do you? He asked. It's a funnel, I said. Julian isn't holding your money. He's using it. He's diverting the funds into Sub-Ledger 4, the high-frequency trading desk. I took a step forward. I wanted him to understand the urgency. They're gambling with it, Elias, overnight. They use the float to leverage positions in foreign currency markets. If the market dips, even by a fraction of a percent, the capital erodes. You could lose the principal. I waited for the outrage. I waited for him to stand up, to shout, to demand his check back. I waited for the reaction of a man who had been cheated. Elias didn't move. He didn't blink. He just looked at me with a profound, terrifying wariness. I know, he said. The words hung in the air cold. Final. I blinked. You know? I know Julian, Elias said. I knew him when he was a logistics officer in Bagram. I know how he thinks. I know he likes to skim. If you know, why are you here? I asked. Why bring him the check? Why? Elias leaned forward. His hands came together on the table, clasping into a double fist. Because honest banks don't cash checks like this, Elara. He gestured to the empty space on the table where the document would be. If I took this to Chase, or Wells Fargo, or Bank of America, if I took this to a manager who followed the rules, what would they do? He looked at me. They would do exactly what you did, he said. They would tear it up. The realization hit me in the stomach. It was a physical blow. They would call the Treasury, Elias continued. They would ask for verification, and the Treasury would stall. They would say the funds are pending review. They would flag my name. They would bury me in paperwork for 6 months, maybe a year, maybe forever. He looked at the glass wall at the busy bank floor beyond it. I don't have a year, he said. So you came to Julian, I whispered. I came to a thief, Elias said, because thieves don't ask for permission. They ask for opportunity. He stood up. He walked to the window, looking out at the tellers, at the customers, at the innocent commerce of the afternoon. I knew Julian would see the routing number. I knew he would recognize the code, and I knew his greed would be stronger than his caution. He turned back to me. He needs the float. I need the liquidity. It's a trade. I felt the room spin. I had walked in here thinking I was the hero, thinking I was saving the innocent veteran from the predatory system. But there were no victims here. There were only accomplices. But the risk, I said. Julian is using my ID. If the audit fails, Julian protects his assets, Elias said. He won't let the audit fail. He's good at this. He's been doing it for years. He's been firing people for years. I snapped. I saw the list. Reynolds, Pedel, Cheng, they're all gone. He uses us as insulation. Elias looked at me. For the first time, I saw something like pity in his eyes. He said, he does. And you're okay with that? I asked. You're okay with me taking the fall so you can get your money? Elias didn't answer immediately. He reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a pack of cigarettes. He didn't light one. He just held the pack, turning it over and over in his large, scarred fingers. It's not my money, Elara, he said softly. What? The 10 million. It's not a pension. It's not for disability. He tapped the pack against the table. Tap, tap. Do you know what a cleanup cost is? He asked. I shook my head. When you close a base, he said, when you leave a region, you have to clean up. Equipment, munitions, local assets. He paused on the word assets. Sometimes, the assets are people, interpreters, guides, informants, people who helped us, people who can't be left behind when the last plane leaves. He looked at me. His eyes were hard now. There are 42 families waiting in a safe house in Karachi. They have visas that expire in 48 hours. They need transport. They need bribes. They need to disappear before the people looking for them knock on the door. He placed the cigarettes on the table. The government promised to get them out, but the government is slow. The Budget Committee is arguing about allocation codes. The State Department is arguing about vetting protocols. He pointed to the invisible check. That check isn't a payout. It's a loophole, a discretionary fund released by a commander who got tired of waiting for permission to save lives. He signed it this morning. He told me to get it liquid by sunset. He looked at the clock on the wall. 3:35 p.m. I need that money in a wire transfer account by 5:00 p.m., Elias said. If I wait for a regular clearance, those families die. He walked toward me. He stopped 2 feet away. He was massive. I am using Julian's greed to buy their lives, he said. And I am using your compliance to make it happen. I stepped back. My back hit the door. You're asking me to sacrifice my career, I said. My reputation. For people I don't know. I'm not asking you to do anything, Elias said. You already did it. You typed the code. He was right. I had already done it. But I can stop it, I said. I can go back to my desk. I can call the fraud department. I can reverse the transaction before the batch closes. Elias looked at me. He didn't move to stop me. He didn't threaten me. He just watched me. You could, he said. You could go out there and be the good bank manager. You could protect the institution. You could save your job. He leaned in closer. But then you have to live with the silence. What silence? The silence that comes after you realize that being right cost 42 people their breath. I stared at him. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to hate him for bringing this into my clean, quiet bank, for making his war my problem. This isn't fair, I said. My voice broke. No, Elias said. It isn't. Fairness is a luxury for people who don't have to clean up. He turned away. He sat back down in the dark. Go back to your desk, Ms. Vance. Do whatever you think you can live with. I opened the door. The sounds of the bank rushed in. The phones ringing. The coin counters rattling. The low hum of conversations. It sounded like noise before. Now it sounded like a machine. A giant, grinding machine that chewed up everything, truth, lives, morality, and spit out clean white receipts. I walked out of the conference room. I didn't look back at Elias. I walked toward the center of the floor. Julian's office was ahead of me. He was still on the phone laughing. My desk was to the right. The terminal was waiting. The green light was blinking. I stood in the middle of the lobby between the thief and the soldier. I looked at the security guard. I looked at the tellers. I looked at Mrs. Kowalski, who was just leaving, clutching her $40. I realized then that the title of my life, the diligent manager, the rising star, was a lie. I wasn't a manager, I was a gatekeeper. And I had to decide which monster I was going to let through the gate. Julian, who wanted to get rich, or Elias, who wanted to save lives by breaking the law, or the bank itself, which would crush all of us if it found out. I looked at the clock. 3:42 p.m. Time was moving faster now. I felt a vibration in my pocket, my personal cell phone. I pulled it out. It was a text message from an unknown number, just 3 words. Doti Sajen IT. I looked up. I scanned the lobby. Who was watching me? Who knew? And then I saw him. Not Elias. Not Julian. A man in a gray suit, sitting in the waiting area near the loan department. He was reading a newspaper. But he wasn't reading. He was watching Julian's office. And on his lapel there was a small round pin. Not a flag, not a bank logo. A tiny gold scale. The symbol of the Treasury Department's Inspector General. They weren't waiting for tomorrow's audit. They were already here. The phone in my hand didn't ring. It just sat there, heavy, warm from the battery. That's CGNET. The message wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. I looked at the man in the gray suit. He folded his newspaper. He did it slowly, creasing the newsprint along the center line. He stood up. He didn't walk toward Julian's office. He walked toward the water cooler. The path intersected mine. It wasn't an accident. I stopped moving. My feet felt rooted to the commercial grade carpet. The man stopped 3 feet from me. He was unremarkable. That was his camouflage. Medium height, medium build. Hair the color of wet pavement. If you saw him in a grocery store, you would forget him before you reached the checkout. But his eyes were different. They were predatory. M's. Vance. He said he didn't offer a hand. He didn't smile. Agent Mercer. Treasury. He kept his voice low, below the level of the ambient music. You have a decision to make in the next. He checked his watch. It was a black digital watch. Functional. Cheap. 90 minutes. You sent the text, I said. I did. He took a plastic cup from the dispenser. He filled it with water. He didn't drink it. We have been building a case against Julian Haynes for 8 months, Mercer said, structuring. Wire fraud. Misuse of overnight liquidity. He's a creative man. You know, I whispered. We know about the code, Mercer said. 70 cents ZLU. We know about the sub-ledger. We know about the gambling. He looked at the cup. And we know about the check you tore up. My stomach dropped. It felt like the elevator cable had snapped. I don't confess, Mercer said. I don't need your confession. I have the video feed. He tapped the side of his glasses. I need your compliance. There was that word again. Compliance. It was the currency of my life. Julian wanted it. The bank wanted it. Now the government wanted it. What do you want? I asked. Julian needs you to sign the batch to clear the funds, Mercer said. If you sign, the money moves. The crime is consummated. We arrest him. Then I should sign, I said. If you want him. No, Mercer said. He poured the water into the drip tray. If you sign, Miss Vance, you become a co-conspirator. You enter the override. You falsified the log. If you sign that batch report, you certify the fraud. He looked at me. I can't protect you if you sign. The statute is mandatory. 15 years minimum. So I don't sign, I said. Correct. You go back to your desk. You let the clock run out. At 500 p.m., the batch auto fails. The transaction voids. The money never moves. And Julian. We'll get him on attempted fraud. It's a lesser charge. He serves 2 years. Maybe 3. But you walk away. He adjusted his cuff. You keep your job. You keep your freedom. You go home to your cat. I don't have a cat. But the file he had memorized said I did. It was a perfect offer. It was the lifeboat. I looked toward the conference room. The dark glass. Elias Thorne waiting in the shadows. What about the money? I asked. What money? The 10 million. The settlement. Mercer sighed. It was a sound of disappointment. Ms. Vance, there is no money. It's a numbers game. It's a ledger entry. It's people, I said. 42 people. In Karachi, Mercer's face didn't change. He didn't blink. He didn't look surprised. We know about Mr. Thorne's charitable ambitions, Mercer said. They aren't ambitions. They are hostages. They are foreign nationals in a non-extradition zone, Mercer said. Their status is not your concern. Your concern is federal banking law. If the money doesn't move today, I said, they die. Mercer stepped closer. He smelled of mince and starch. Vance, listen to me very carefully. The United States government does not negotiate with liquidity errors. We do not allow dirty money to move just because the intent is noble. He pointed a finger at my chest, not touching, just aiming. If that money hits the sub-ledger, it becomes laundered. It enters the global stream. We lose it. We cannot allow that. So you're sacrificing them? I said. I am enforcing the law, Mercer said. Thorne is a desperate man. He is being used by a corrupt banker. You are the circuit breaker. He checked his watch again. Break the circuit, Alara. Don't be a martyr for a cause you don't understand. He walked away. He went back to his chair. He picked up his newspaper. He vanished back into the background. I stood there. The water cooler gurgled. A bubble of air rising to the surface. I was the trap. The system had designed a perfect cage. If I helped Elias, I went to prison. If I helped the agent, the families died. If I helped Julian, well, Julian was dead either way. But Julian didn't know that. I looked at the glass cube. Julian was waving at me. He was pointing to his wrist. He was smiling. He thought we were partners. He thought I was the good little soldier who would cover his tracks because I was afraid of losing my bonus. I walked to my desk. I sat down. The chair felt cold. The terminal was still awake. BTCHCSCGMD, the cursor blinked. I looked at the paper file Marcus had left, the physical signature, the digital signature. Both were required. I picked up the pen. My hand was trembling. Not a little, a lot. I dropped the pen. It rolled across the desk. I looked at the screen. I could just leave. I could stand up, walk out the front door, and never come back, let the clock run out, let the machine fail. I would be fired, but I wouldn't be in prison, and I wouldn't be dead. But the silence. Elias had warned me about the silence. The silence of 42 ghosts. I looked at the conference room. Elias had stepped out. He was standing in the doorway. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the agent. He knew. He saw the gray suit. He saw the pin. He knew the game was rigged. He looked at me. He gave a small nod. It wasn't a plea. It was a permission. Save yourself, the nod said. I understand. That nod broke me. It was the first honest thing that had happened in this building in 10 years. He was releasing me. He was taking the weight back onto his own shoulders. And that was why I couldn't let him do it. I looked at Mercer. He was reading the sports section. He was waiting for me to be a coward. He was counting on it. The system relies on our cowardice. It relies on us choosing the safety of the rule over the danger of the truth. I picked up the pen. I gripped it until my knuckles turned white. I wasn't going to sign the batch for Julian, and I wasn't going to refuse it for Mercer. I was going to do something else, something that wasn't in the manual. I opened the drawer. I took out the stamp, the red one, the one we only used for accounts that were deceased. D. Sepharozam. I looked at the override command on the screen, 77 Ziolo. I typed a new line. I didn't authorize the batch. I didn't cancel it. I typed our route da destine omenal enter y. I was going to change the destination. I wasn't going to send the money to the trading desk. And I wasn't going to send it back to the treasury. I was going to send it to the only place where neither of them could touch it. I was going to send it to the general ledger, the bank's own operating fund. I was going to dump $10 million of toxic, radioactive, stolen money right into the heart of the bank's own payroll account. It was suicide. It would trigger every alarm in the Western Hemisphere. It would freeze the bank's assets instantly. No one would get paid. Not the tellers. Not Julian. Not the shareholders. But it would force the money to exist. It would make it real. It would force an immediate public audit. Mercer couldn't hide it. Julian couldn't steal it. And Elias would have chaos. And in chaos, there is opportunity. I looked at Mercer one last time. He lowered the paper. He saw my hand on the keyboard. He saw the look in my eyes. He knew. He started to stand up. Mins Vance! He barked. It was the first time he raised his voice. It was too late. I pressed enter. The enter key didn't click. It thudded. A dull, plastic sound that marked the end of my life as a civilian. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. The terminal simply stared back at me. The command line blinked. PRCSCNG. I sat with my hands in my lap. I felt light, weightless. It was the feeling of jumping off a cliff and realizing halfway down that gravity is the only honest thing in the world. Then the screen changed. It didn't turn red. It didn't flash warnings. It turned blue. A solid, calming, corporate blue. White text appeared in the semtuestim hal trektuar IMBLNC didixda asmati sefaguadanatidid. ERO-1000 GL fat to the hum of the computer fan died. The hard drive spun down. Silence rushed into the vacuum. Then I heard the sound of the room changing. To my left, Marcus's screen went blue. To my right, the empty chair's monitor went blue. Across the lobby, the tellers stopped moving. One by one, like dominoes falling in slow motion, every screen in the branch synchronized with mine. The coin counters stopped rattling. The receipt printers stopped hissing. The ATM in the vestibule beeped once loud and sharp and powered down. I had just given the First Meridian Bank a heart attack. By dumping $10 million of unverified funds into the general ledger, I had broken the math. The bank's central brain couldn't reconcile its own weight, so it did the only thing it knew how to do. It froze everything to prevent a run. What did you do? The voice wasn't Julian's. It was Mercer's. He was at my desk. He didn't grab me. He didn't pull a gun. He leaned over my shoulder and looked at the blue screen. He read the error code. He stood up straight. He adjusted his glasses. He wasn't angry. He looked impressed. And disappointed? You forced a liquidity freeze, he said quietly. You didn't just move the money, Elora. You stopped the pulse. It's in the general ledger, I said. It's real now. You can't hide it in a sub-account. You can't scrub it. It's in the operating fund. A Mercer looked at me. You think you created transparency? He said. You didn't. You created a hostage situation. The glass door of the elevated office slammed open. Julian ran out. He wasn't the composed regional manager anymore. His jacket was off. His tie was loose. He looked wild. My screen, Julian shouted. My screen is dead! The trading desk is offline! He saw Mercer. He stopped. He looked at me. He looked at the blue screen on my desk. He understood instantly. The color drained from his face, leaving it the color of old ash. The general ledger, Julian whispered. You put it in the general ledger. He walked toward me. His hands were shaking. Do you know what happens when the GL goes out of balance by 8 figures, Alara? The Federal Reserve automated switchboard disconnects us. We are delisted. Until the balance is corrected. He grabbed the edge of my cubicle. We can't trade. We can't wire. We can't even pay the electric bill. Then fix it, I said. I can't fix it, Julian screamed. The system is locked. It requires a level 5 audit to unlock. That takes 2 days, I said. I looked toward the conference room. Elias Thorne was standing there. He was watching the chaos. He heard the words. 2 days. The audit meant eyes. It meant the money was stuck, but it was there. It wasn't rejected. It was pending. And because it was in the general ledger, it was protected by the bank's own survival instinct. The bank couldn't delete the money without admitting it lost $10 million. They had to account for it. Agent Mercer, Julian said, his voice pleading. You have the authority to override the freeze, cut the line, isolate her terminal. Mercer looked at Julian. He looked at him with the cold detachment of a man watching a bug drown in a puddle. I don't have override authority on a GL halt, Mercer said. That's the point of the safeguard, Julian. It protects the economy from people like you, people like me. Julian laughed. It was a hysterical sound. We had a deal. You let the transaction run. You pick me up on the back end. I give you the network. I froze. I looked at Mercer. Mercer didn't flinch. The deal is void, Mercer said. The asset is compromised. He reached into his jacket. He pulled out a radio. Control, this is Mercer. We have a code 0 at the Meridian branch. Total system lock. Suspect is in custody. Secure the perimeter. Nobody in, nobody out. He looked at me. Stand up, Miss Vance. I stood up. My legs felt heavy. Turn around. I turned around. I felt the cold steel of the handcuffs click onto my right wrist, then the left. They were tight. They pinched the skin. It was a sharp, grounding pain. You are being detained for cyber, terrorism, and banking fraud, Mercer said. He spoke loudly enough for the terrified tellers to hear. He was building the narrative. I wasn't the whistleblower. I wasn't the hero. I was the rogue employee who crashed the system. I was the villain. Julian watched me being cuffed. He looked relieved. He saw a path to survival. She went crazy, Julian said, pointing at me. I tried to stop her. She accessed the developer console. She's unstable. Mercer ignored him. He pushed me gently but firmly toward the exit. As we walked past the conference room, Elias stepped out. He blocked the path. Mercer stopped. "Move, Mr. Thorne," Mercer said. Elias didn't move. He looked at me. He looked at the handcuffs. He looked at the blue screens reflecting in the glass walls. "The money?" Elias said. "Where is it?" "It's frozen," Mercer said. "It's in the bank's stomach. It will take 48 hours to digest." Elias nodded. 48 hours is too late," he said. He looked at me. "But it's not rejected." "No," I said. "It's not rejected. It's accepted. They just can't digest it yet." Elias smiled. It was a sad, broken smile. "If it's accepted," he said, "then I have a receipt." He held up his phone. He showed me the screen. It was his banking app. Pending deposit. Fund $10,000 and ordered status. It's showing up, he said. "It's not liquid, but it's visible. So what?" Mercer asked. "You can't spend it." "I don't need to spend it," Elias said. He tapped the screen. "I just needed to show it." He looked at me. "Proof of funds," he said. That's all the smugglers needed. A screenshot. A promise that the money exists. He put the phone in his pocket. "They'll move the families tonight. On credit." I felt a tear slide down my cheek. I hadn't saved them. I hadn't paid for them. I had just bought them a promise. But sometimes a promise is enough. "Mr. Thorne," Mercer said, "you are leaving." "Now, I'm going," Elias said. He looked at me one last time. "Thank you, Alara." He didn't say sorry. He didn't say it was going to be okay. He just thanked me for the ruin of my life. Mercer shoved me forward. We walked toward the revolving doors. The lobby was silent. The customers were staring. Mrs. Kowalski was still standing there, holding her temporary card, looking confused. She saw the handcuffs. She saw the agent. She looked at me with fear, not concern. I was the danger now. We reached the door. Mercer stopped. He leaned close to my ear. "You think you won?" he whispered. "I bought them time," I said. "You bought them debt," Mercer said. "And you bought yourself a felony? The bank will come back online, Alara. They always do. And when they do, they will need a body to bury." He pushed me through the door. The cool Seattle air hit my face. It was raining. Of course it was raining. Blue lights flashed against the gray sky. Police cars. 3 of them. They weren't here for Julian. They were here for me. I looked back through the glass. I saw Julian standing in the middle of the frozen bank. He was already on his cell phone. He was already spinning the story. He was pointing at my empty desk. He was surviving. The system had collapsed for a moment, but it was already rebuilding itself around my absence. I was the error code, and I had just been deleted. The lawyer they assigned to me was young. He smelled of cheap cologne and desperation. He didn't ask me about the check. He didn't ask me about the families in Karachi. He didn't ask me about the override code or the general ledger. He just looked at the plea deal on his tablet. "It's a good offer, Elara," he said. We were sitting in a small, gray room in the federal courthouse. The table was bolted to the floor. "They're dropping the cyber terrorism charge," he said. "They're dropping the wire fraud." He scrolled down. "They are filing it under gross negligence resulting in commercial instability and unauthorized access to protected systems." "What's the sentence?" I asked. "No jail time," he said. 5 years probation, 300 hours of community service." He paused. "And a lifetime ban from employment in any FDIC-insured institution." I looked at his hands. They were soft hands, hands that signed papers. "And Julian?" I asked. The lawyer hesitated. He tapped the screen. "Mr. Haynes is cooperating with the Treasury. He provided evidence regarding systemic vulnerabilities. He's being treated as a witness." I felt a cold smile touch my lips. Of course, Julian didn't go to prison. Julian turned state's evidence. He probably gave Mercer the names of the board members who set up Sub-Ledger 4. He traded up. The system doesn't punish the sharks. It punishes the blood in the water. "Take the deal," the lawyer said. "I'll take it," I said. I signed the paper. I didn't use my metal pen. I used a plastic stylus attached to the table by a wire. It felt like signing my own death certificate. But it wasn't death. It was erasure. 6 months later, I am working in a warehouse in Kent. It is a fulfillment center for an online retailer. The noise is constant, conveyor belts humming, scanners beeping, forklifts whining. It is the opposite of the bank. There is no carpet here. There is no silence. There is no money, just boxes. Thousands of brown boxes moving in a river of cardboard. I stand at a station for 10 hours a day. I tape boxes. I apply the shipping label. I push the box onto the belt. Tape, label, push. It is a rhythm. It keeps my hands busy. It keeps me from thinking about the quiet glass cube in downtown Seattle. I live in a small apartment near the airport. My credit score is 420. I cannot open a checking account. I am unbanked. I cash my payroll checks at a liquor store that charges me 3%. The man behind the counter counts the cash slowly. He licks his thumb. He doesn't know who I am. He doesn't know that I once held the power to freeze the Federal Reserve. He just sees a woman in a high-visibility vest who looks tired. One rainy Tuesday, I saw Julian. I wasn't looking for him. I was waiting for the bus. A black sedan stopped at the light. He was in the back seat. He was wearing a light gray suit. He looked tan. He was looking at his phone, typing with his thumbs. He looked important. He looked like a man who had survived the shipwreck by standing on the shoulders of the drowning. The light changed. The car moved on. He didn't look out the window. He didn't see me. Why would he? I am part of the landscape now. I am part of the infrastructure that people like him drive past. I went to the library that night. It is the only place that is quiet enough to think. I used the public computer. I searched for First Meridian Bank. It doesn't exist anymore. 2 months after the incident. That's what the news called it, a glitch. First Meridian was acquired by a larger conglomerate. Global Trust, they rebranded everything. New logo, new colors, blue and gold, trustworthy colors. The article said the acquisition was strategic. It mentioned that the former leadership team had been restructured. It didn't mention the general ledger freeze. It didn't mention the 48-hour panic when the bank couldn't verify its own existence. The system had healed itself. It had grown new skin over the scar. I closed the tab. My hands were shaking. I needed to know. I typed in the search bar, Karachi Refugee Transport March 2024, nothing. U.S. Military Interpreter Settlement, nothing. Elias Thorne, nothing. The silence of the internet was louder than the warehouse. Had it been for nothing? Had I destroyed my life for a lie? Maybe Mercer was right. Maybe the money never moved. Maybe the proof of funds screenshot was just pixels. Maybe the families died waiting for a transfer that never cleared. I felt a sickness rising in my throat. I logged out. I walked to the front desk to return my guest pass. The librarian was an older woman. She wore a cardigan and glasses on a chain. "You have mail, dear," she said. I froze. "What?" "Someone left an envelope for you." Dropped it in the return slot. "It has your name on it." She handed me a white envelope. It was standard size. My name was written on the front in block letters, ELRA. No last name. No return address. The handwriting was jagged, heavy, like the person had pressed hard on the pen. I took the envelope. It felt light. I walked outside. I stood under the awning, out of the rain. I opened it. There was no letter. There was no check. There was a photograph. It was grainy, taken with a cheap phone maybe, or printed on a bad printer. It showed a group of people standing on a tarmac. It was night. There was a plane in the background, an old cargo plane, painted gray. There were children, women holding bundles. Men looking over their shoulders. They looked exhausted. They looked terrified. But they were standing on the tarmac. And in the foreground, standing with his back to the camera, was a large man. He was wearing a frayed canvas jacket. He was helping a child up the ramp. I turned the photo over. On the back, there were 3 words written in that same heavy script. Cielyard. Cuffy Harmony. I stared at the words. Gone. They weren't in the safe house anymore. They weren't waiting for the audit. They were gone. The debt had been paid. Not with money, but with consequence. I put the photo in my pocket. I walked to the bus stop. I sat on the cold metal bench. I thought about the title of the story that had become my life. Bank manager tore up a black veteran's 100 check. That's what the camera saw. That's what the security footage showed, a woman tearing up value. But that wasn't the story. I didn't tear up the check to destroy it. I tore it up to release the truth inside it. I tore the facade. I tore the polite, bureaucratic lie that said, "Follow the rules and justice will happen." I tore that lie in half, and her boss froze in silence. Julian froze because for 1 second the machine stopped. For 1 second. The money wasn't a number on a screen. It was a weapon, and I had pointed it at them. The bus arrived. The brakes hissed. I got on. I swiped my transit card. It beeped. Insufficient funds. The driver looked at me. He was tired. "Go ahead," he said. "Just sit down." I walked to the back. I sat by the window. I watched the city roll by. The skyscrapers of downtown Seattle were glowing in the distance. Towers of glass and light. They looked beautiful. They looked invincible. The system survives. It always survives. It eats people like me, digests us, and grows taller. But tonight, somewhere in the world, 42 people are breathing air that doesn't taste like fear. Because I broke the machine for 2 days, I touched the glass of the window. It was cold. I am not a manager anymore. I am not a rising star. I am a ghost in the ledger. And for the first time in my life, the silence inside my head isn't waiting for permission. It is just silence, and it is enough. Thank you for listening. If this story stayed with you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear it.